Welcome to the Great Exchange, where we bring history's greatest figures back to life for one final conversation. Today we sit down with a man who reshaped the course of history, Gaius Julius Caesar. Dictator, general, orator, and the architect of Rome's transformation from a republic to an empire. Let's hear from the man himself. Caesar, your name has echoed through history for over 2,000 years. How do you feel about your legacy?
Fortune favors the bold, and history remembers those who seize their moment. I did not seek power for glory alone. I sought it to bring order to Rome. If my name endures, it is because I refused to let chaos reign.
You were born into a patrician family, but not one of the most powerful. What drove you to greatness?
Ambition, necessity, and the realization that Rome was a city built on power struggles. My family, the Julii, traced its lineage to the gods, Venus herself, if one believes the myths. But in my time, we held little real power. The Senate was controlled by a handful of noble families, and Rome was in constant turmoil. From an early age, I understood that influence could be won not by birth alone, but by action, and so I acted.
You grew up during one of Rome's most violent periods, the conflict between Marius and Sulla. How did that shape you? Sulla saw you as a threat even though you were just a teenager.
War was all I knew as a child. Marius, my uncle by marriage, was Rome's great general and champion of the populares, fighting for the common people. Sulla, his rival, led the Optimates, the old aristocratic elite. Their battle tore Rome apart. When Sulla seized power, he purged his enemies. Marius was dead, and I was suddenly in danger simply because of my name. Sulla ordered me to divorce my wife, Cornelia. She was the daughter of one of Marius's allies, and to Sulla that was unacceptable. I refused. A true Roman does not betray his family for convenience. My defiance angered Sulla, and he placed me on the proscription list, marked for death. I was forced to flee Rome, hiding in the countryside, constantly moving to avoid capture. It was my first lesson in power. The weak are hunted, the strong must survive.
And yet Sulla eventually pardoned you. Why?
Influence. Friends and relatives pleaded my case, and even some of Sulla's allies saw my potential. Sulla reluctantly spared me, but he warned them all. There are many Mariuses in Caesar. He saw what I would become before I did.
After escaping Sulla's wrath, you went in an unexpected direction. You sought a priesthood instead of a military career. Why?
Survival. I was still young, still vulnerable. Becoming the Flamen Dialis, the high priest of Jupiter, would have kept me away from politics and ensured my safety. But when Sulla's rule ended, I seized my chance. The priesthood was too restricting. I could not even touch a horse. So I abandoned it and set out to prove myself in battle.
And that led you to your first real military experience in Asia. What was that like?
A revelation. I fought under Marcus Thermus in Asia Minor and distinguished myself during the siege of Mytilene. For the first time, I tasted real command. When I personally saved a fellow soldier and was awarded the civic crown, one of Rome's highest honors, I knew my destiny was not to be a priest, nor just another senator. I was meant to lead.
One of the most legendary stories of your early life is your encounter with pirates. Tell us what happened.
The Cilician pirates. I was captured while sailing near Rhodes. These fools thought they had taken an ordinary Roman nobleman. They demanded 20 talents of silver for my ransom. I laughed and told them I was worth at least 50. I educated them. For 40 days they were my audience. I recited poetry, debated philosophy, and warned them that they were making a grave mistake. They laughed until the ransom was paid, and I returned with a fleet. As I had promised, I hunted them down and crucified them all. Mercy is for those who deserve it. Promises are meant to be kept.
So after your military successes, you entered politics. What was your strategy?
Charm and spectacle. The Senate was filled with old men clinging to the past. I gave the people what they wanted: games, festivals, and the promise of a Rome led by a man of action. I became Pontifex Maximus, Rome's high priest, through sheer political maneuvering. Then I aligned myself with the populares, winning the love of the masses. With every speech, every act of generosity, I made myself indispensable to Rome's future.
And yet you still faced powerful enemies. How did you navigate Rome's treacherous politics?
By making allies even as I prepared for war. Pompey, Crassus and I formed the first triumvirate, a secret pact to control Rome. With Pompey's military strength, Crassus's wealth and my cunning, we ruled from the shadows. But I always knew one day it would come down to me alone.
Your conquest of Gaul was one of the most significant military campaigns in history. What was your ultimate goal? You faced fierce opposition from the Gallic tribes, especially Vercingetorix. How did you defeat them?
Glory and security. Rome's enemies surrounded it, and Gaul was a land of restless tribes. Some senators saw it as a buffer. I saw it as an empire waiting to be claimed. My victories in Gaul would ensure my place in history and my control over Rome itself. I defeated them by understanding that war is not only fought on the battlefield, but in the mind. Vercingetorix united the Gauls, but unity born of desperation is fragile. I allowed the enemy to believe they had an advantage, then I took it away. At Alesia I built not one but 2 walls around his city, one to keep his army in, one to keep reinforcements out. He starved, he surrendered, and Gaul became Rome's.
After your victories in Gaul, the Senate feared your power and ordered you to disband your army. Instead, you crossed the Rubicon. Did you know you were starting a civil war?
Of course. The moment my foot touched the other side, there was no turning back. Rome had given me everything, and now jealous men sought to strip it away. I would not let them. Alea iacta est, the die is cast.
But you were outnumbered. Pompey had the Senate, the legions of the Republic, and the wealth of Rome behind him. How did you win?
By moving faster, thinking ahead and never hesitating. Pompey relied on tradition, believing that the Senate's authority was enough. But power does not reside in decrees, it resides in the hands of those willing to take it. I advanced swiftly, capturing city after city without bloodshed. By the time Pompey realized my strength, it was too late.
And then came Pharsalus, your defining victory over Pompey. Walk us through your strategy. With Pompey defeated, you returned to Rome. But instead of declaring yourself king, you took the title of dictator for life. Why?
Pompey had more men, but his greatest weakness was fear. He fought defensively, believing he could outlast me. I knew better. His cavalry, his greatest advantage, I lured into a trap, striking at their flanks with hidden infantry. The moment his cavalry broke, his army followed. Pompey fled, and with him the illusion of Senate control. Kings are despised in Rome. Dictatorship was a Roman tradition, one man given absolute power in times of crisis. But I was not a tyrant. I was a reformer. The Republic had failed because it served the few at the expense of the many. I would restore it, under my rule.
Your reforms were sweeping: land for veterans, debt relief, calendar reform. What was your vision for Rome?
A Rome where power was earned, not inherited. The Senate was weak, corrupt, and driven by self-interest. I gave the people bread and stability. I expanded citizenship, strengthened the provinces, and laid the foundation for an empire that would outlast me.
Julius Caesar. History remembers you as a conqueror, a statesman, and a visionary. But beneath the politics and warfare, you were also a man entangled in love, betrayal, and ambition. How much did these shape your destiny?
Power and love are intertwined. A ruler must inspire loyalty, devotion, and sometimes fear. Love can be a strength or a weakness, depending on how one wields it.
Your first wife was Cornelia. When Sulla, Rome's dictator, ordered you to divorce her, you refused. Why risk everything for love?
Because a man who betrays his own heart will betray anything. Sulla believed I would bow to his will, as others did. But I was not like them. Cornelia bore me a child, Julia, and no threat, be it exile or death, would make me abandon them. One must stand firm, even against overwhelming power. I lost Cornelia too soon, but I never forgot the lesson.
Then came Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt, your lover, and the mother of your only known son. Was your love for her genuine, or was it purely political? Some say you restored her throne for love. Others claim you sought Egypt's wealth and power. Which is true?
Why must it be one or the other? Cleopatra was unlike any woman I had ever known. Brilliant, ambitious, commanding. When I arrived in Egypt, she was locked in a civil war with her brother. I saw in her not just a queen, but an equal. Together we could shape the world, both. Love without power is fragile. Power without love is empty. By making Cleopatra Egypt's ruler, I secured Rome's influence over the richest land in the Mediterranean. But make no mistake, my son with Cleopatra Caesarion was not just a child. He was a symbol that Rome and Egypt could be one.
Let's talk about the man who would be your greatest traitor, Marcus Junius Brutus. You spared him after Pompey's defeat, treated him like a son, yet he conspired to kill you. Did his betrayal surprise you? Many believe you saw him as your own child.
A man who trusts too much will one day be struck down by his own kindness. Brutus was an idealist, a man clinging to the past. I offered him the future, but he chose to stab me instead. Love, respect, disappointment, all of these. I saw in him a younger version of myself, torn between loyalty and ambition. He believed he was saving Rome from tyranny, but in truth, he was sealing its fate. The republic he sought to restore died with me.
Your life was filled with war, ambition, and power. But it all ended on one fateful day, the Ides of March, March 15th, 44 BCE. Let's relive those final moments. Did you ever sense your doom approaching? History tells us that warnings surrounded you. The soothsayer called out, "Beware the Ides of March." Your wife at the time, Calpurnia, had terrible dreams of your murder. Even a sacrificed animal was found to have no heart. Did you truly ignore these signs?
When a man climbs too high, the winds of envy will try to pull him down. I had conquered my enemies, but I had not conquered fear. Fear that I had become too powerful. Rome loved me, but Rome also feared me. And fear breeds betrayal. A ruler does not live by superstition alone. I had faced death before, on the battlefield, in the Senate, in the streets of Rome. If I had heeded every warning, I would have never risen to power. The gods may send omens, but it is men who act upon them. That day, I considered staying for a brief moment, but Decimus Brutus convinced me that I would look weak if I hid from shadows. That was my mistake. I thought my power made me untouchable. I underestimated the daggers hidden in the folds of their togas.
Over 60 senators conspired against you, including men you had forgiven, Cassius, Cimber, Casca, and Brutus. Why did they betray you?
Because they clung to the past. They called me a tyrant, but I was Rome's future. They feared I would make myself king, but I needed no crown to rule. My name alone carried more power than their traditions. Their betrayal was not for the Republic. It was for their own survival. A blade cuts deeper when held by a friend. Brutus was an idealist, but also a coward. He thought he was saving Rome, but in killing me, he condemned it to chaos.
You walked into the Senate, surrounded by men who had already decided your fate. Describe those final moments.
I entered the Senate as I always did, fearless. As I took my seat, the conspirators closed in. Tullius Cimber approached, pretending to ask for a favor. Then I felt the first strike. A moment later, the others followed, striking from all sides. For a moment, I thought I could fight back. But when you are surrounded by traitors, there is no escape. I fell to the ground, my blood spilling onto the marble floor of Pompey's theater, fitting since it was Pompey whom I had defeated in my rise to power.
And then the final blow, Brutus's dagger.
Yes. I saw his face, hesitating, but then striking like the rest. Et tu, Brute? Those were not words of anger, but of disappointment. Even you, my son. If Brutus had joined me, I could have still survived. But at that moment I knew it was over.
The conspirators thought they had saved the Republic, but instead they unleashed civil war. Antony Octavian, your great-nephew, hunted them down. Within years, Rome was no longer a republic, but an empire. Did they truly achieve anything?
Nothing. My death was not an end, but a beginning. The Republic was already dead, they just refused to see it. My heir, Octavian, would rise from my ashes and become Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. My assassins did not save Rome.
Julius Caesar, you lived as a conqueror and died as a martyr, but in many ways, your influence has never faded. What final words do you leave us with?
A man is measured not by how he dies, but by what he leaves behind. The Ides of March took my life, but they did not take my power. I shaped Rome, and in doing so, shaped the world. And that is true immortality.
Julius Caesar, military genius, statesman, and the man who reshaped Rome forever. What do you think? Was Caesar a hero or a tyrant? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more legendary conversations on The Great Exchange.